You won't find it on the maps of the Palace of Westminster for obvious security reasons, and you can't normally get the guides to show you. In fact, the precise room I'm talking about doesn't really exist anymore, since it was blown up in the Blitz, but the replacement is faithful enough to the original. It is one of the rooms used by the Prime Minister when he or she wants to meet colleagues in the Commons, and you don't need to know much about the decor because it is predictable. Think of loads of green leather and brass studs and heavy coarse-grained oak panelling and Pugin wallpaper and a few prints, slightly squiffily hung. And think smoke, because we're talking about the afternoon of the 28th of May 1940, and in those days many politicians, including our subject, were indefatigable consumers of tobacco. It is safe to assume there wasn't much daylight getting through the mullioned windows, but most members of the public would easily have been able to recognise the main characters. There were 7 of them in all, and they were the War Cabinet of Britain. It is a measure of the depth of their crisis that they had been meeting almost solidly for 3 days. This was their 9th meeting since the 26th of May, and they had yet to come up with an answer to the existential question that faced them and the world. In the chair was the Prime Minister Winston Churchill. On one side was Neville Chamberlain, the high-collared, stiff-necked and toothbrush-moustached ex-Prime Minister, and the man Churchill had unceremoniously replaced. Rightly or wrongly, Chamberlain was blamed for fatally underestimating the Hitler menace and for the failure of appeasement. When the Nazis had bundled Britain out of Norway earlier that month, it was Chamberlain who took the rap. Then there was Lord Halifax, the tall, cadaverous Foreign Secretary who had been born with a withered left hand that he concealed in a black glove. There was Archibald Sinclair, the leader of the Liberal Party that Churchill had dumped. There were Clement Attlee and Arthur Greenwood, representatives of the Labour Party against which he had directed some of his most hysterical invective. There was the Cabinet Secretary, Sir Edward Bridges, taking notes. The question before the meeting was very simple, and one they had been chewing over for the last few days as the news got blacker and blacker. No one exactly spelled it out, but everyone could see what it was. Should Britain fight? Was it reasonable for young British troops to die in a war that showed every sign of being lost, or should the British do some kind of deal that might well save hundreds of thousands of lives? And if a deal had been done then, and the war had effectively ended with the British exit, might it have been a deal to save the lives of millions around the world? I don't think many people of my generation, let alone my children's generation, are fully conscious of how close we came to it, how Britain could have discreetly and rationally called it quits in 1940. There were serious and influential voices who wanted to begin negotiations. It is not hard to see why they thought as they did. The news from France was not just bad, it was unbelievably bad, and there did not seem the slightest hope that it would improve. German forces were lunging towards Paris, buffeting aside the French defense.